I lived and worked out in the Hebrides for about 3 years. And when you're out there right through all seasons, you get a really deep sense of what living in this type of community must have been like, particularly in the old days. And even when I was there in the very late 80s, early 90s, it still hadn't really been modernised there. And as I was saying, we didn't have any satellite TV, and there was no mobile phone communications and things. Buildings were often run on generators, so because the power cuts were very frequent, and so you get an amazing sense of isolation and exposure to the elements. And it wasn't that unusual for people just to go missing and out for a walk, or even driving. Cars would often get swept off of causeways connecting little islets, and there's quite a few of the places I used to visit up in the northwest of North Uist. Skulpig Bay had huge towering waves, hundreds of feet high. Oh, I nearly get caught out myself a few times, and I almost get swept away taking photographs. You can really underestimate the power of nature. I was taking a picture and I thought it was pretty safe at a certain part of the rocks at Skulpig Bay, and then I saw this wave which I couldn't believe the height of it. It just came out of nowhere, and I thought, I'm in quite a lot of trouble, and it just swept right over my head, and I crouched down. I was lucky, but quite a few people have been swept away in that very same area. I've watched it over the years. A lot of people gone missing out for walks. So one day I decided to do something pretty adventurous. If you go right up to the top of North Uist, and bearing in mind we're in a very remote place anyway, and this is before people had phones, mobile phones. I still don't carry a mobile phone to this day, and I cycled all around the country without you wearing a cycle helmet. So in those days, no one had mobile phones, and they wouldn't have worked because there was no cells to pick up the signal anyway. So I decided to do something quite interesting, which was to walk about a few miles, 3 or 4 kilometres across what's known as it looks like Vallay Strand. The spelling is Victor Alpha Lima Lima Alpha Yankee Valley. It looks like in English, and Strand, and it's actually pronounced Falla in Gaelic. Strand, which is a stretch of wet sand. And when you're out in the Hebrides, and I lived in a number of little cottages, you become very aware of tides. And there's a lot more to tides than what you might think. I think most people would realise with a tide, the water goes out and the water comes back in, all that type of thing, over a period of 12 hours. And at 6 hour point, it's high tide, and 6 hours later it's low point, and this repeats over a 12 hour period. But maybe not so much, people maybe not so much aware of neap and spring tides. And spring tides are not to do with the season, it's to do with the maximum height and minimum. So over a period of a few weeks, you get a change in the highest point of a tide and the lowest point, and that's called the neap and spring. And it's to do with just how much variation you get between the maximum tide point to the minimum. And over a cyclic period, you'll get much higher maximums and much lower minimums, more extreme. So when you're going to cross these flat sands over to the Isle of Falla, then for the most part you can't get across because the tide's in, and you'd need a boat, and that would be pretty tricky because you might get stuck on the sand. But at very specific points of the year you can walk across, but you really have to know what you're doing. You have to know the tides, because you're only going to get a window of opportunity of maybe a couple of hours, and then it's too risky. You will get swept away. So I decided to take this one on, and I did my usual thing, was drive way up to the top of North Uist on my Nissan Micra. Then I parked the car and headed out towards the start of the beach walk, and of course no one knew where I was, no phone connection, nothing like that, so I was on my own, isolated, and I could see the Isle of Vallay a couple of miles away in the distance, and I knew the walk would maybe take me 3/4 of an hour. And at this point I'd timed it at the lowest tide, neap tide point, the lowest you can get to maximise my chance. And you've still got quite a lot of water standing on the sand, but enough to wade along through with good boots. But what was out there on the island, which I knew about, was the ruins of the biggest house on the Uist. There's not many big houses on Uist at all. They never really built them, lots of little cottages. But one which has got more than one level, a few levels, goes way back, God knows how long, it goes back quite a long time, when there was a few people left on this island, maybe even up to 60, and there was a community there, and a big house called Vallay House. And I thought I'd be interested to go and see that, because I could almost see the outline of it from the distance. So what I did was I set out across the Strand, or stretch of sand, and was checking all the time, making sure I had my tide times right, and assessing whether I would be able to get out there and get back, because if you get stuck, that's you. So I went out over the sand. It was fairly straightforward, a lot of water about. I think I had pretty good boots on, walking boots, that's all you needed. And I got on to the island of Vallay after a certain amount of time, 3/4 of an hour, and I looked back onto the main part of North Uist. So I'd made it to the island, which had temporarily been allowed me to get access simply because of the very low tide. And then I walked up over the grass, the Macaire it's called, the moor, up towards this house. And it was the ruins of a house, but it was pretty well intact, lots of glass still in the window frames and all the rest of it. A big house, and I was surprised to see something so big, and in the Hebrides, because you never meet anything that big, just a little cottages. So I thought I'll go inside here and have a look inside, and I looked back over the Strand, and I thought, looks like the tide's coming in. I don't know how much time I have, but maybe I've got another half an hour. So I thought I'll use this half an hour to explore inside this big house, which had become dilapidated. So I walked inside the house, and of course I'm on this island, there's no one else about, and I go through the door and inside, and I go into the forecourt of the house, and it looked more a bit like a hotel. It looked like it was like a kind of reception, and there was a wooden staircase going up to somewhere, and another few rooms and lots of different things, and it was very well preserved inside, considering you could still see all the signs of activity in the past. The wallpaper was still in, all the designs, there was furniture there, and I walked up the stairs, and they were pretty much falling apart, wooden steps, so I was careful and started to explore some rooms upstairs, and then it happened again. My blood turned to ice, and this was a bright sunny day, and a cold shower just instantly hit me, and I thought, there's someone else or something in here. Something pretty horrible. And it just hit me just right out of the blue. Didn't even expect it. I felt a horrible feeling. And I thought, get out of this place. And I went down the stairs very quickly, almost falling through them, got to the front door, expecting a hand to pull me back, and ran out into the broad daylight. And then I looked over the stretch of sand, which is the Vallay Strand, and I thought, oh no, because all I could see was water. I thought, what happened? Have I lost track of time here? I thought, the tide's in. I cannot get across there. Now, what am I going to do? I'll have to wait at least 24 hours, and I've got nothing with me. So I'm going to just have to lie on the grass here for 24 hours, and what's in that house? And I was looking at my perspective, and I thought, well, it is foreshortened. I'm looking at it at an angle. Perhaps I should just try to run across the sand, have a go at it, because any more time and you're going to get more water coming in. So what I did was, right, just go for it. So I kind of jogged in my walking boots across the sand, and the water was coming in, and I thought I could be one of these people who's going to get swept away. And that was enough to keep me jogging, and it keeps your adrenaline going. And I jogged away over the sand and got to the other side, back onto the main part of North Uist. And I tell you what, I never went back there again. That was my first and last trip.